I was recently in Moab, Utah, visiting some of the national parks and viewing some of the sights. But what really intrigued me the most was some art I saw in a local coffee shop. It was made from some old used plywood that in most cases would have gotten thrown away. But this art looked great and I thought it would be a great project for you to try. So let's do it. Now the first thing we need is some old plywood. Something that's beat up, something that looks old, starting to get discolored. In many cases, stuff that you would normally throw away. For this project, that should work perfect. Now let's say you don't have any old plywood. Well, if you go to your local home improvement store, go look for the worst ones in the pile. I'm talking about the ones that are peeling or cracked or have large voids or have water damage or things along the line that most people will not touch. And then go to one of the managers and ask for a discount. Sometimes they'll give you up to 70% off. And guess what? There's your great way to get some old looking plywood really cheap. Now that we have our plywood, we need to make a bunch of cuts. And I'm going to be using a sliding miter saw for this. But you can use a circular saw, a jigsaw, or whatever you'd like. We want these strips to be about 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. But we do not want them to be all the same. So don't set up any kind of a stop block to make sure they are. We actually want those random sizes because it'll look more natural. Once you get a bunch of strips cut out, we want to separate these out into 3 separate piles. Look for the ones that are nice and clean, everything looks pretty. We want that in one pile. Look for all the ones that have the voids and the miscolorations and just odd shapes, put that in another pile. And then put the ones that may have got broken in the process of cutting them, put those in a separate pile. We're going to use all 3 of these, so don't throw away anything. Next, we need some kind of a backing board. In this case, I'm just using some thin plywood. I think it's about 1/8 of an inch, maybe slightly thicker. In any case, you can cut these to whatever size you want. I cut these, I believe these are like 8.5 by 11. It just happens to be the perfect size. I could cut it out from the scrap wood I had. But remember, get some nice backing boards so we can start applying all of our art. Now, if your backing board happens to have any major imperfections like this one does here, that's okay. We can cover this up in the process of us building this. So that is definitely usable. Now it's time to start the pre-assembly. First off, we need to look through our good pieces. Find one that actually looks pretty nice. And the reason why is we're going to use this as like the basis of our ground, kind of like the sand in the desert. And by having the first one down here on the bottom looking a little bit nice, the ones with the imperfections as we go up will stand out a little bit more and look a little bit better. Now here comes some of the fun part. Go over to the ones that are already broken from the saw. And what you want to do is we want to start breaking them apart even more. And you want to try to do this in random sizes. You don't want them all to be the same size, so just have some of them thick, some of them wide, some of them thin. However they break apart, that's what you can use. Now I know that some of this wood can be a little bit hard to break, and that's why you can grab a pair of pliers. If you grab them and just pinch off pieces of the end of the wood, you can find it a lot easier to break apart some of this plywood and make those edges look really rough. When it comes to the pieces that have the voids and the discolorations, you're going to want to break these apart too, but I usually try to wait and figure out the exact size I need before breaking these apart since they are so special. Now that we have most of our wood ready to use, let's look back at that original piece that we were measuring up before. In my case here, it is a little bit long for our backboard. So what I'm actually going to do is take this over to the saw and trim this down so that it's right about the size. That way it looks a little bit more uniform on the outside. It looks more like a picture or art. With our base now to the correct size and roughly in place, we're going to start building off of it. And I really like this piece here. If you notice, it's kind of rough on this side, but it's still squared off on this side. This does not look natural. Just remember, in nature, almost nothing is symmetrical, and this is way too squared off. So we're going to take some pliers and break this apart so we can start off with this piece. Couple things to remember. First off, you don't want any large splinters sticking off. Like I have a little one right here. I'm going to break it off because that looks just too unnatural. But you do want it to look really rough because that's how a lot of the ground looks. Then once you have your wood exactly the way you want it, You just want to kind of position it in place wherever you want on your display, and continue to just build it up with other pieces. Now in this case here, I'm going to try and keep it on the flat spot, but you can always kind of move it over and have a void right there in the middle, and that'll look almost like a cavern in your little stones. It's any design that you want that you can continue to build off of. So let me build a few of these and I'll show you what I mean. Here's two examples for you, and they kind of look somewhat symmetrical because unfortunately that's how I build a lot. So you can build this however you want. You could have one really large and one really small, or you can have a small rock holding up a huge rock, whatever you would like. In this case here, if you look real close, let me show you this. Let me zoom in and show you this little spot. You'll notice on both of these pieces that these were really dark in comparison to the other pieces of wood here. How did I do that? Well, actually, I took the plywood and I broke it in half. And if you look at the piece right here in the middle of this plywood, it's a lot darker than the surrounding pieces. And that just happened to be in a little accent mark I added to each of these. That's a great way to get some extra color from your plywood. Now, let's see if we can take our backing boards and make it look a little bit better by adding a little bit of color. Here's two quick examples. This right here, I'm thinking more of like a sunset. You know how kind of the sky gets a little bit red as the sun's going down with a darker, bluer sky kind of in the background. And then on this one, I'm thinking more of a sunrise as the colors start to come up. In either case, I think these would look really good with your art right in front of it. But you could always just do a standard black, and that'll make your wood really stand out. And there you go, the wood on top of all that color really starts to look good. Now considering this is kind of a night scene, it'd be good if we had a moon up here, and if we take kind of like a large jumbo craft stick, or maybe even just some really thin plywood, you can cut a circle out of one side really easily and attach it up in the sky. And the moon should look something like that. Now it's time for you to glue all that to your board and put it on your wall. But let's not stop there. There's actually a way to use the same exact plywood to give you a completely different look. Let me show you. Now take your plywood back over to your saw, but instead of cutting out little strips, we're going to cut out about a 6-inch section. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but you do want a large section to work with. Then take the plywood over to your workbench along with a chisel. Now don't use one of your good ones. This right here is an old ratty one that I use to break stuff apart. You want it to have a little bit of an edge, but it does not have to be super sharp. And then of course you need a mallet or a hammer. Then take your plywood, turn it on edge, and grab that chisel. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and split this wood right down the middle all the way across. If for some reason it splits in an odd way, that's okay. Just do your best at it. As the plywood starts breaking apart, you're starting to get a bunch of different colors and shapes and just designs that you can work with to get you some neat looking art. So let me finish breaking this apart and I'll show you what I mean. And one word of caution, be careful of splinters. You can easily get these stuck in your hand. And there is a simple example of just splitting apart the plywood, and you get so many different grain structures and colors, and it just looks really good, especially like on this black backdrop. Now one downside is, since we are using plywood that we split apart, there's a good chance you'll probably have to sand down the back of this so that you can glue it to it. But other than that and some splinters, this is really easy to make as well. There are a few things you need to be aware of if you're going to build this. I would definitely stick with using just plywood for this setup. And the reason why, if you look at MDF, it's solid just about all the way through. It won't give you any color variations. OSB, well, there are a bunch of strands in it which will give you a lot of the randomness, but you also need some of the steady lines going across. It's a combination of the two that really sets this off. Now in the process of showing this to my wife, she mentioned a number of groups that would probably love to do something similar to this. So I wrote this down because, well, to be honest, I'm probably not going to remember most of these. First was a paint and sip. Apparently people like to paint and I guess sip drinks along the way. They might like to do something like this. Of course, stained glass classes. This might be a great alternative. Give them ideas for the glass. Paper quilling. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but maybe you do. She obviously does. She said they would like to use this and maybe do some crafts with this and get used to that. Of course, this would be great for kids' projects of all ages. You can prep everything and get them ready, and they should enjoy it as well. Now here are the 3 that I put together real quick and easy, but now's the time I'd like to hear from you. Which one of these do you like the most? The more plain one, the more two-tone color, or just a black backdrop? Plus, which wood type do you like the best? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And now it's time for you to get out in your shop and have fun building and have fun making some art.